All right, this is so unprofessional. Welcome back to another episode of ASMR Cooking with Red. I don't know. Last time I was so sleepy. Just let me give you a little bit of background of why I'm doing this, okay? I'm doing this because it's fun. I'm doing this because I can send it to my friends and I can record how I'm living my Parisian life with cooking mostly Chinese food. But anyhow, this episode we're going to dive very deep into les raviolis. Wait, let me check. I have actually searched for this. Les raviolis à la citrouille à la chinoise. Yes, this is what we're cooking is not at all French. It's actually from my hometown, Xinjiang. But I mean, this is, I guess it's dumplings, right? Dumplings. People argue where dumplings are from, and who invented dumplings and stuff. And is it really ravioli? But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who invented this. This is one of the best things ever, because this is sweet and savory at the same time, and also spicy. I will tell you why I do this and or how I make it. But anyhow, let's start with making the dough, because unlike some lazy people who only pursue convenience in their lives, well, me most of the time, but this time, because this weekend I decided to make my own wrapper, because it's fun and you can always control, how do you say, the texture. You can always control the thickness and all that. So I strongly suggest you to make your own wrapper. So to make this, it's actually pretty easy. You're just going to mix flour, salt with water, and I will go a little bit into the flour in next episode, I think, because the flour is very important when you're making specific type of dishes like this, for dumplings and noodles and stuff. And you should care about what the flour contains in most cases, because the flour sometimes contains in different countries different level of protein. For example, the one that I'm using contains 11% of protein, maybe 12, I don't remember, which means this is somewhat of a high glutinous flour, which is not actually ideal for this recipe. So you see what I'm doing right now, after mixing the flour with I would say a bit of salt, right? This half tablespoon of salt. What I did was I boiled some water. I forgot to boil, avant. Like my language system is really going up right now. I forgot to boil some water before this. But anyhow, the reason I am boiling water right now is to make in Chinese, I think it's called 湿面 or 半湿面 or something, which means half wet dough. So you're basically going to kill some of the, or let's say with high temperature, kill off some of the gluten. So if you're interested in cooking, you probably know that flour contains two types of protein, amino acids. What do you call this? I don't know. So when these two proteins or molecules, when they interact with water, they create gluten. But when they meet, let's say, high heat, such as if you pan fry the toasty flour, or in this case using high temperature water, boiling water, the gluten will never develop for parts of the dough. So what that means is the dough at the end, the wrapper in this case, would not be that chewy, and it creates a bit of a wetter dough, because if you can comprehend that some of the water is being absorbed in gluten, so it would be less moist in normal cases, but in this case we are killing off some of the gluten formation. So in this case, some of the flour will stay wet. So in the final process, when you're actually making the dumpling, the wrappers will stay a bit more wet, so it makes it easier for you to manipulate the wrapper, plate the dough. So I guess this is the my ideal way to do it, my favorite way to do it. But you don't really have to go through this, especially if you're using, I would say, 9 gram or 9% protein flour. In normal cases, AP flour would be like 9 to 10%, I think. In that case, you don't really have to go through this step. And this is also comes to personal preference, I think. I do not like chewy dumplings. I do not like the wrapper to be very chewy. And even with this, you see, I'm actually like boiling very, like I'm hitting very few grams, I would say, of flour, and I'm mixing it really well to incorporate it with the rest of the flour, so that you can have somewhat of a consistent texture. But it doesn't really make that much of a difference. But for me, especially when I'm making the dumpling, making the wrapper, and trying to wrap it into a shape, it makes it a lot easier, and the final product would be a bit more soft, on the softer side, which is how I like it. You can try this method, but for the first time, if you're making this with normal flour, you can just simply use room temperature water, which what I'm adding right now. I was going to give you specific let's say with grams or with milliliters, like how much water do I use for how much amount of flour and stuff. I find it to be very counterproductive, because when I was living in Beijing, I lived there for 9 years. I have tried 3 or 4 different flours, but somehow the with the proportion of flour to water always worked, because I think a lot of people make their own dumplings, a lot of people make their own doughs there, so I guess there is some level of consistency with the protein or some other contents in the flour, so it makes sense. But when I use the same recipe in France, for example, it creates a very different texture. And I remember making the same thing in Spain, in my friend Subi's house. And of course, at the time we made with, I believe, high glutinous flour, and it came out very differently. So I would say just try to add water little by little and get into the consistency of your ear. So I guess, what do you call this, like the bottom of your earlobe? So if you can get to that consistency, which is soft but not to a point that you feel wet, I think this would be the best consistency for something like a dumpling. And the next episode I will be talking about noodles, which in that case we can get very deep into gluten and all that. But for this, I don't think you should be looking for something hard. It should feel soft but not wet. So add water little by little, and also you can see the steps that I'm taking, the how I'm making the dough, and you will see what level of consistency that you should look for. And I always do that, actually. If I'm looking for a recipe, I'm not really looking for the specific scaling of the flour to dough ratio and all that, because to be honest with you, flour is something very strange. It's never consistent. There's something always wrong with it. So I think it's better if you just remember how it felt when you're kneading the dough. So I'll fast forward a little bit. I'm just kneading the dough, and I knit it till it's somewhat consistent, somewhat that it doesn't have white spots, which means like unblended flour to the water, the rest of the dough. And as you can see, I'm knitting for around 5 minutes, I would say. It's not too long. After 5 minutes, the dough should feel like your earlobe, or like this. It's not too hard, it's not too soft, because you're knitting the dough, so it should get tough. But you are going to rest it for a couple of, I would say 15 minutes, and it will become soft again, so that we can work on the dough or the wrappers. And now I'm going to be doing the most annoying thing about this process, which is to cut the pumpkins. In this case, I believe it was 300 grams, 400 grams of pumpkin. This was actually a pretty good pumpkin. I can smell, when I open the wrapper, I can immediately smell the pumpkin. I don't know how French people actually use this pumpkin. I guess they will put it in the oven and mix it with other vegetables and stuff. I remember eating something like that, but in this case, for me this is just perfect, because I don't have to de-seed it, or I don't have to really clean it and stuff. This was pretty good. And what I did was I simply rinsed it off, because I felt like there was a layer of like old pumpkin texture. I don't know how to describe this. Like very, I don't know, it doesn't feel good in your hand. It creates a foam. I washed it out, and also I now will have to cut off the peels. And the peeling of the pumpkins can be pretty tough on your hand, because it's not easy to do, right? It's a very thin layer, but you cannot really do it with potato peeler. So what I did was I just chop it into like smaller chunks, and then I peeled it. And if you can see, I actually made it pretty easy, and I found that this is a pretty good method. But although it made the actual chopping of the pumpkin a bit more complex, because if it's bigger, of course you can just handle a lot of pumpkins at the same time, but I find it to be, you know, a lot more time saving than to really, you know, peel the pumpkin with pumpkin peel, potato peelers and stuff. So, you know, the end goal is to create small chunks of pumpkin, somewhat consistent shape of pumpkin, so it doesn't really matter how you achieve this at the end. And I have seen people actually just blend it, and I think it would be okay if you're, you know, I guess if you're just looking for the pumpkin flavor and the pumpkin texture, I guess it'll be fine. But I don't like mushy food. I don't like, you know, I don't really like the creamy texture of things, so I'm not a huge fan of that. But if you find this to be very complex, or if you find it to be very complicated or time consuming, then you can definitely go blend it. But for me, I would, you know, rather go through the hardship. To be honest with you, this is a step that my mom doesn't even like to take, because her hand hurts when she chops the pumpkins, so she always asks my father to to help her with that, and that's the only way my father gets to to eat this food, so that, you know, to go through this process. So I grew up eating this dish, I would say, almost every October and November, and this was such a family thing for us, you know, when since we were kids. And I remember helping my grandma when she was still alive, before I was 7, to help make her this dish, because I used to eat a lot of it. I will tell you this, I used to eat the same amount of pumpkin dumplings as what I'm eating right now. So it's a serious business how much I actually enjoy this. So yeah, this is part of my childhood memory, so that's why I like it a lot. And people who, for example, my friend Berna, she doesn't like other types of, you know, strong, my hometown flavored dumpling styles, but she likes this. So that can tell you, people who don't even like, you know, strong heavy food, they would enjoy this, because this is sweet and sour and spicy. So I would strongly suggest you to go through this step, you know, to chop your own pumpkin. It's not too hard. I think the problem is pumpkins are very slippery sometimes, especially when they're well ripe in a sense. So it makes it a bit hard for you to chop it like this, chop it into small chunks. But it's really, really worth it. And if you're making this for the first time, you don't really have to chop it very small. You know, just imagine you're going to be wrapping it with dumpling wrappers. You probably are going to buy your own wrapper from the supermarket, so just imagine you're biting into, you know, juicy chunks of pumpkin. It's juicy because we're going to add something else, but just know that it shouldn't be too big and it shouldn't be too mushy. But as I said, if you want to make it mushy, then why not? So the whole pumpkin manipulation, pumpkin chopping, I spent around 20 minutes to do this, because I was a bit slow, to be honest with you. I don't know why. Every time when I'm making these videos, I'm very self-conscious, and the more I try to be perfect, the more I either make it slow or I make it ugly. You will see later. So I don't know. If you're not, this is a whole afternoon activity, by the way. So you know, you don't really have to be very fast. Why? You know, just enjoy the process of chopping pumpkins while listening to a podcast or listening to this. I guess this could be served as a podcast because I talk a lot. You know what I mean? Just enjoy life while making this very stress releasing, especially what I'm doing right now, just kneading the dough again. The reason I knit it again is because, well, I just wanted to check if the dough is in the is in this texture that I wanted, and it was soft, and it was not dry, it wasn't hard, which was perfect, because you will, if you have experience making hard dumpling wrappers, like, you know, to roll out like very thin dumpling wrappers with hard dry dough, you will know what hell feels like. So you shouldn't be afraid of drinking and smoking, but that's not the point. What I'm saying is this was soft and this was very malleable. Very malleable. So I mean, the process that we went through, the first process, which was to boil some of the, not boil, I guess, like, how do you call this? burn? No. I don't know, just pour some hot boiling water into the noodle or the dough flour was very helpful. And as you can see, after I knit it for, I would say around 2 minutes, I will let it rest again. And yes, and as you can see, I have a small piece of dough in the that cover up the air hole in the pot because I don't want it to have my dough dry up. It happens sometimes. You can use wet towel, but I don't have clean towels, and as some of my friends have pointed out, my towels are old and ugly. I'm like, I know, these aren't even my own towels. These are Claire's towels. But anyway, my friend's Claire's towels. I stole them. And as you can see, I'm chopping up some very, spicy stuff. What do you call this? Thai bird eye chili. Thai's bird eye chili. I forgot if it's Thai bird eye or Thai's bird eyes. Anyhow, this is one of the most spicy peppers that I can find in French supermarket. Actually, I bought it from Japanese supermarket, but in Paris anyway. These are great because I think we've also used this in the last episode with the eggplants. These are spicy, but these are very simple in a sense. These are not fermented and these are not smoked or dried, so it has a very front spicy flavor. So it's not too complex, and I think it works perfectly with this dish. Again, this is not just for the color. This is for the actual spicy, that edge. So I guess if you don't like spicy food, you can skip the pepper. You can use red bell pepper, which makes it more beautiful. But in my case, I like to have it a bit more spicier than other people. And it may sound strange to have sweet, spicy, and savory sour at the same time, but it works for me. And I'm adding half of a small onion because I had way too many onion in my room and it was getting a bit old, so I decided to use it up. And you can definitely skip this. I always add it because I feel like onion is something that makes everything very savory. So I always add some onion, but you don't have to add it too much because this is the front flavor should be pumpkin and flavor-wise beef. We're going to use beef later. It's not a vegetarian dish. I think you can make it vegetarian, just have to add a little bit of olive oil to make up for the juice, to make up for the fat. And also the onion will give a lot of its juice to the filling, so after it's cooked, it will be juicy. And trust me, you don't want to eat mushy, dry pumpkin. So I would say adding onion in my recipe. You know what? I'll be confident to say that you should add half an onion. If it's a big onion, then you use the quarter, and you will not regret it. In the end, remember, this is a savory dish. This is not a dessert. And as you can see, I have got out some beef, and you don't have to use a lot of beef. I just added, I would say, this amount. It's not too much. This is for one person's 3 meal. I would say 3 or 4 meals. I think in the end I stretch it to 4. So you don't really have to have a lot of beef or a lot of other meats if you're using. For me, beef here just do 2 things. First, to make it juicy, because this is 20% ground beef, and that's how we got the juice, right, from the fat. And the second thing is beef has it doesn't have a lot of flavor, but it gives a texture because you can actually chew on something, because pumpkin is not something that you can actually chew if you have eaten boiled or steamed pumpkin. So meat will give the textural variation. Who am I? Textural variation. Anyhow, so I would strongly suggest you to use beef. And chicken, ground chicken should work, but I'm not a huge fan of chicken with pumpkin, so beef is my choice. And I added some white pepper instead of black pepper because I don't like white pepper is fermented, so it gives floury taste to it. So why not? And I added some salt and some sugar. Okay, let me explain why did I add sugar. I was expecting the pumpkin to be very sweet, but it was just okay. And as I mentioned, the flavor profile of this dish is sweet, savory, and spicy, and I feel like it's not going to be sweet enough, so I added a bit of sugar. It shouldn't make the filling too sweet. It should only give a hint of the sugary, powdered sugars, or like, let's say, like ground sugars, sweetness, because it's very different from how pumpkin sweetness, right? It's very different. So I guess having a little bit of sugar should kind of round out the flavor a lot. And as you can see, I'm mixing it with my hand, and I mentioned earlier I don't like mushy texture, so I'm actually being somewhat careful not to make it too mushy. But the reason I'm doing it with the hand is because you can never achieve the cohesion. How do you even call this? Like the coherent texture if you're not using your hand to actually go in to mixing the beef with the pumpkin. And it's actually pretty difficult to mix the pumpkin with beef. You have to go through this for, I would say, around 2 or 3 minutes to really get into it. And don't forget to salt, don't forget to season your filling, because this is the last time that you can adjust the taste. And unlike any other dumplings, you are not going to eat it with the vinegar, unless you're my friend Semi, because he is a complete monster who eats pumpkin dumplings with vinegar. There I said it. I actually made it for him when he came to Paris a month ago, and you cannot imagine the look on my face when I saw him eating this with the vinegar. I was very displeased. I'm just saying it out, putting it out there. Anyway, so this is the last time you're going to be seasoning this, so be very generous, but don't make it too salty, because at the same time, I don't like eating, salty dumplings, salty. I don't like anything wrapped that is salty. I want it to have the flavor of the vegetables, the filling that they should have, and also spicy. Everything should be spicy. So anyhow. So we have came to the part that it all of a sudden started recording horizontally. I don't know how to fix this. Maybe I should invest in a GoPro. Maybe I should invest in a camera. I don't know. Let me know. But I think it should work. The purpose of this is not to make a beautiful videos. The purpose is to teach my friends, who are mostly the people who are watching this, learn how to make this complex dish. I would say it's not complex. It's actually pretty simple, right? Like the steps. You're just making the filling, just making the dough, opening up the wrapper, and also wrapping it, filling it. So it's not too complex. It's just very time consuming and somewhat tedious. I would say that, because I made a lot of it. So in the end, it took me around an hour to make the dumplings. So it can be tedious, but at the same time I was watching Naruto in French, by the way, to improve my French by watching a Japanese cartoon that I've watched at least 50,000 times. But anyhow, so what I did was I opened up the dough. As you can see, you can open up the hole in the middle and just stretch it like I did, and because of my proficiency in English, I don't think I can explain a lot of the processes that I'm taking in perfect English. So I'm strongly suggesting you to watch it very carefully again and again and again. And if you're tired of my voice, you can just mute it when you're watching it for the third time. And always be generous with flour, because it will stick. Because as I mentioned, the dough is somewhat wet. It's not too dry. And it has a tendency to stick. And as you can see, after I make the snake, I just cut it up into smaller pieces, smaller chunks. So these are the base of your wrapper. And you don't have to be very precise with this. Some people would actually take out the rulers and do it. I don't care. I just want to have similar shapes. My dumplings are not twins. They're not even cousins. my dumplings are neighbors. my dumplings are okay. I'm joking. I'm cracking myself up. All right. Yes. So what you're going to do is you're going to flour the base of your dough, and you're going to press it into a shape like somewhat round, and as you can see, it wasn't round. I tried to save it for the camera, but it just didn't work, so I throw it out. And yeah, so you're going to be doing the same pressing action for every single dough, and you are going to open this dough, this disc, I would say. The reason you make it into a disc is because it will make it easier for you to open up later. But it doesn't really matter. Sometimes, you know what, the way that I enjoy this personally is that I will make this chunks of dough, and I will make the disc, and I will wrap the disc with filling and make a dumpling, and then go on to the next chunk. So I actually, when I'm making it personally, I do not like to do this because I like to have variation to what I'm doing. And as you can see, I was already getting bored. I couldn't even find my fingers anymore because I was just so bored. I don't like to repeat the same action over and over again. But this is the fastest way to do it. This is the normal way to do it. And if you're watching a cartoon or Netflix show, and if you're listening to a podcast, you can actually learn from, my method, which is to create a chunk and press the disc and open up the wrapper and fill it up individually. And it will make it a lot more fun because you're actually going to be thinking about what you're going to do next. And as I mentioned earlier, this was a family activity for us. And what I mean family, it's not just for my parents and my sister. We used to do it with a huge family, with all my cousins and my grandma and all that. So for me, making this dish specifically, rather than any, what is this ugly shape? You see the struggle there? I couldn't even make it into a round shape. But it is completely okay, because you will see later, it doesn't matter. As long as you can close the wrapper at the end, as long as you can make it into a round dumpling shape, it doesn't matter. Don't let anyone shame you for the square dumpling wrappers that you make. See, this one was perfect somewhat. I tried to fix it to make it even more perfect and show it to the camera. You see, you have no idea how proud I was at the time. Anyhow, and the rest of them are shit anyway. Yeah, as I was saying, this was a fun activity because for some reason this was everyone's favorite dumpling, because it was sweet. I guess children like sweet stuff, so that's probably the reason why I was so enthusiastic about making this. And yeah, I just have very fond memories of making this dish. And you see, I floured a little bit because it has the tendency to stick to the cutting board. And I do not have the best work surface for this. This is actually the ground of my apartment, and it was not the cutting board is too small, and I didn't have a lot of space to work on and stuff. But it's fine. We make the most of what we have, right? It's the philosophy of my life at this point. And as you can see, after all these ugly looking round resembling shapes later, we have reached the point that is the most important and I believe the hardest to explain. You're going to fill out the wrapper with, I would say, appropriate amount, which doesn't mean anything. I would say if you're a starter, I guess if you're watching this for the first time, if you're watching this video, you probably are a beginner. Try to use less filling when you're practicing. Try to fill the dumpling with less filling, because it will make it very complex for you to close it, because you're going to make the pleats and stuff, so it will make your life a complete hell. And for the first dumpling, I'm not going to explain how you make it. I will, show you a better result later so that you can learn. So for the first one, I'm just showing you how to do it. So what you're trying to do is just basically creating 3 pleats on each side. So it's not too hard. It shouldn't be too complex. I would say this is a bit harder than regular or normal steamed dumplings, I guess, because normal steamed dumplings or the Chinese style dumplings are just 2 pleats, right? For in this case, I think I made either 336 or 448. So that really depends on how big is the pleat and how you move your thumbs and your middle finger. And as you can see, the first one wasn't perfect because the first one is always somewhat of a trial, right? And I don't make this a lot, so the first one is always ugly. And for the second one, as you can see, I got still a lot of filling, and I stabilized. Look at my hand movement. I stabilized my pointing finger as a back of the dumplings, and I use my middle finger and my thumb to create the please. And because of my language skills, and also because this is a very complex procedure to describe with words, I want you to watch it probably around 20 or 30 times, because to be honest with you, when I was learning this, which wasn't that long ago actually, it took me a while to get used to the pleating technique, and especially with how to move your fingers. It's not easy, and it looks somewhat doable, but I don't know. For me, it was a bit difficult to learn. So the best way for me to learn was just watching the videos, because no amount of language no amount of words can describe what you're actually doing. See, I am deliberately making it closer to the camera so that you can see, and I made 8 please, and I switched the direction, and I used my thumb as pointing finger as a stabilizer, and used my thumb and middle finger to create the please. And my mom, and I believe, if I remember correctly, my sister also has a very different way of creating the please, and they make it very beautiful, and they can do it very fast, and I cannot do it. And I am grateful that I can do this to somewhat resembling the ones that I used to have at home, and they're made by my grandma and my mother. But still with this I was struggling, you see, to make it very fast. But I actually enjoy this process, so it doesn't really matter for me. And this one I think worked best, so I think you can watch this for a couple of times. And I'm going to be completely silent for the next one, so that we can all watch and enjoy a few minutes of me not speaking. Well, actually, no, I'm joking. Alright, now after you have enjoyed the work of art, you just have to know you have to repeat this in my case, I think it was 40 or 50 times. I don't remember. It was a lot of dumplings. It was a lot of them. And it took me around an hour, I think, maybe a bit more, or an hour and 10, 15 minutes. Anyhow, it was enough for me to eat for three or four meals, I think. So it's definitely worth it. With the price in Paris right now, this was definitely worth it. If you're eating this in a restaurant, I'm sure if you for one person you're going to spend at least 15 euro. I think I will have to try. You know what? I probably would never, because I can make better than the restaurants. I'm just being humble here. I would have said I can make it better than my mom, but that's not true. But if I'm being humble. But definitely better than restaurant. And I forgot to say something. If you're using very lean meats, for example, I guess if you're buying ground beef, if it's less than 20%, you can just add a little bit of olive oil. The reason you want to add it is because you do not want to have dry filling. And the reason I mention this because I remember the dry pumpkin dumplings that I had in the restaurant back in Beijing, and I did not like it at all because it was overpriced and it was dry and it was mushy as well, and it wasn't spicy. It was just all kinds of wrong. Anyway, Anyway, so you just have to steam it for 10 minutes with high heat. So 10 minutes means when the steam comes up, count 10 minutes, okay? Not the moment you like add the water and try to steam it. No, when the steam comes up after the water is boiled. All right. As you can see, after 10 minutes, I am now dead. I'm in heaven. Let's see the moment of magic. Wow, that's it. Oh, again, we're dead again. So I just want to demonstrate to you how it looks inside. And I believe this one, I burned my finger grabbing this one, so be very careful not to do it when you're doing it. And you see, the inside is still, you know, is a consistent shape. It's not like a runny, you know, situation. It's very juicy because of the meat, and when you bite into it, it was very, very juicy. And it's not very clear on camera. Well, probably I should invest in the camera, but anyhow, it was very tasty. It was spicy. It was moist. I hate this word, but again, it was moist, and the wrapper was soft, and it was fantastic. Chewy, but not too much. Anyhow, this is my recipe, I guess, tutorial demonstration video of Chinese style or Xinjiang style, my hometown style pumpkin dumplings. Hope you enjoyed this. And if you ever make it, well, if you do, please let me know. Have a good time. I'll see you next week with even more complex, even more, you know, babbling video. All right. Good luck. Bye-bye.